Okay. Hello, everybody. This is your boy Shrimp once again, back for you for more adventures with Art with Adventures. Sorry, I'm being tongue twisted again. So, here I am once again to add more episodes to my uh, growing growing videos here for my digital arts. Hmm. And we're here right now to not continue because we already finished my last concept art. If you wanted to see the final outcome of my art that I did last time, you can check my YouTube because I uploaded also a uh, what you call this, a short, no, not a short, a speed run. As it's a uh, sorry, I should have prepared for this before starting this video. But yeah, here we are, my channel. Okay, so yeah, so I made a time lapse video of my uh, concept art that I did with you guys that I slowly made. So I the mm, so the time lapse started during my me starting coloring the design. So it really didn't started from me sketching it, but it's still kind of helpful if you want to see how the process was done really fast and just want to see it quickly. But yeah, you can check it out my channel, and please leave a like and subscribe if you like it. And yeah, also, if you want to see the actual design or the JPEG or the actual photo, you can check my Twitter or my Pixel account. I uploaded them in my on those accounts, and so you can see it directly. So right now, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to start doing some sketches, uh, some ship concept arts with trying to make shapes into faces. Mm. So I've seen this tutorial that I bought the other day, and I wanted to try doing this because I've been doing mostly traditional face structure when I'm starting my sketches, and it's either that or anime style kind of a sketch. But yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards to trying to be more free with my art style. Like, for an example, will be the art style of One Piece. There's like a different kinds of characters there. You can see different kinds of style in creating faces. There's round faces, square faces, triangle faces, oval faces. It's kind of weird, I know, but it's more free and I think more artistic, you may say, because it's more towards the showing more how you can adjust this, be more productive in that kind of art style, I think. And so I'm going to try it with this live stream today. So I've already created a canvas. So I went for a landscape style of canvas. This is actually around uh, 1920 by 1080. So yeah, it's like a screensaver or something for a desktop. Uh, okay, so I'm going to start sketching with this and hope I can make some wonderful arts from shapes that I'm going to draw right now. And also, for the story today, we'll continue with the Dead Mage doesn't want a fourth time again. And we're now in chapter 49. And we'll definitely finish the volume 2 for this arc. And after this, I'll definitely change the thumbnail next week and post the volume 2 cover and some probably the sketch I'm going to do today. I'll probably post it also with the volume cover, and that will be the goal for today is to create that sketch so that I can apply it for the thumbnail. Also, a bit of information. I also was planning to start this new project because there's a guy, a friend of mine, who asked me to do a commission. But for now, we're still on the plans or still planning for the concept art that I'm going to do. So he's going to commission me to do this. It's probably going to be a comics. It's been a while since I did a comic art, so this will be a first for a while. So yeah, mm, I'm still kind of wondering what kind of story I'm going to make because it's a concept art for the a manga story. So I need to also think of the story of this piece. If you've seen some of my work in my Twitter account or my Pixel account, I made some I made some comics also already, and let me see if I can show it to you guys in Pixel, just really quick, so that you can see some of my work. Okay, let's go to my account. Okay, sorry, that was in my other monitor. So yeah, this is my Pixel account, and yeah, so this is the one that I made for Gura. Yeah, so this is the manga or comics. It depends on what term you're trying to use, but I would pretty much term this as a manga strip. Yeah. So this is my story about Gargura coming to the shore or the land with her trusted partner Blue, who is always inside a jar or inside a bubble. And here we are. Yeah. So this has been a few years ago that I made this. hmm I really enjoyed making this. I hope you would like this story. It's a very short story. I did part two, three, four. Yeah, still working up on making more of the story. But right now, I've been busy because of some of the concept arts that I've been training and some of the work stuff that I've been doing also. So yeah, I'll probably continue it. I'm planning to make a manga about Watame, Black Watame, and Botan in the near future. But for now, it's in the it's in the plans for now. So yeah, yeah. So that's why the Gargura story is being in a Hayatsu because of this, and also if if the commission comes through, mm, I might probably do that first. Then the Watami and Botan story. Then after that, I'll continue the Gargura story. If I am not inspired to do something, some concept arts that I want to do. But yeah, here's the art that I did with you guys. It's really pretty good, I might say. Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry, my scroll button is kind of weird. So this is the concept art that we did once again, and we're moving on after this. Okay, so back to sorry, back to the story we're trying to continue here for Vandally, for the death mage who doesn't want to afford time. So yeah, so from the last time that we read, he's been training under in the dungeon right now with his friends, the undead titans and the ghouls and some of the goblins that are in the same age, the same age as him. And right now we're going to continue the story from that, and we'll see where the vampires will bring the war to them, because they were planning to attack the village where Vandally is right now. So yeah, we'll continue with that story, and uh, I will continue also with my drawing. So yeah, it's been a long talk, so let's not uh, talk too much anymore, and I'll continue with this. Okay, guys, I will talk to you later.
Chapter 49. The victory against the mid-boss was unfulfilling, but the dragon golem is next. Insectoid monsters have no ability to think and move solely on instinct. Upon hearing this, one might think that this would make it easier for tamers such as those with the animal trainer skill to control them. However, the reality is that their instincts are too powerful for humans to manipulate. There have been those who came up with ways to use special herbs, incense and certain sounds to control them to a certain extent, but the final result was too unstable to be called taming. It was a dangerous method where one mistake would end with the would-be tamers being eaten. And thus, the fact that insectoid monsters and undead cannot be tamed became widely known. Is that how it's supposed to be? Vandali asked after listening to Borkus's explanation. Buzzing. It is, replied Borkus. More buzzing. I find that hard to believe. Vandali had been captured by the countless cemetery bees and was now being carried around by them. They're so friendly, though. It apparently happened to be the time of year where the cemetery bees would change the location of their nest when Vandali had found them. And then they had been caught by his death attribute charm. There had been a previous incident where the undead in a dungeon were friendly towards Vandali, but he hadn't managed to tame them and bring them outside the dungeon back then. However, these bees had followed Vandali's party even down to the next floor. It was likely because the level of Vandali's death attribute charm skill had increased since back then. Or perhaps it was simply that cemetery bees were more compatible with Vandali. Ghouls, vampires and cemetery bees. This death attribute charm works on a lot more things than I thought, said Borkus. Cemetery bees were originally one of the types of monsters created by the Demon King to fight against humans and take over this world. It is possible that they were actually created by an evil god who rules over death. Either way, if death attribute charm levels up any further, it might be a good idea to start avoiding dungeons and devil's nests where there are lots of undead. It would be pandemonium if I was followed by hordes of undead each time I entered and exited such places. It might be an effective way to gather forces quickly, though. So what are you going to do about that guy? Asked Vigoro, pointing at the mid-boss on the 20th floor of Borkus's sub-dragon savannah. Jaya-un. The rank 6 venom wyvern spread the wings that were attached to its front limbs as it let out a roar. It was a wyvern that had grown older and increased its rank, becoming larger and evolving to gain the ability to secrete deadly venom from its claws and the enormous spike at the end of its tail. Its intelligence was still just at the level of being relatively intelligent for a beast, and it was still incapable of spitting some form of deadly breath. However, the speed and mobility of normal wyverns couldn't compare to those of the venom wyvern. It was said that it would be impossible even for class adventurers to defeat this monster in close-range combat without being able to fly themselves. I'll try fighting it alone, just as we planned at the start. Vandali had been planning to use the mid-boss that appeared before the boss of Borkus's sub-dragon savannah as a test for himself. Even if he leveled up and his attribute values increased, it would be meaningless if he couldn't put them to use in real battles. He wouldn't be able to confidently say that he had become strong enough to not be killed instantly by the dragon golem. For that purpose, he was to fight the venom wyvern one-on-one and see if he could defeat it. Of course, without using a mana absorption barrier to remove the mana from its wings and bring it to the ground. Of course, even if he was able to defeat the venom wyvern, there was no guarantee that he would be able to avoid an instant death at the hands of the half-destroyed dragon golem. That dragon golem was overwhelmingly superior to the weak dragon that was currently flapping its wings threateningly in front of Vandali. Well, this is just to get an idea of how strong I am. I know I'm not going to gain any special abilities or anything from beating this mid-boss. If I win, I'll try going down to the dragon golem again, and if it's still not going to work out, I'll just have to come back and do more training. Make sure you don't die, Borkus warned him. Do your best, boy. Do not forget that we are all watching over you, said Zadyrus. Receiving this encouragement, Vandali stepped forward to challenge the venom wyvern on his own. I failed this time, too, said Vandali. Well, it can't be helped. I heard that class adventurers need to have a lot of talent or put in an incredible amount of hard work. Vandali works hard for his age, but it's one-on-one. You're a tamer, so you don't need to worry about it, right? After failing for the 5th time, Vandali had returned to Talersheim and was resting while developing more weapons, making katsubushi and doing other various things. He was currently attending a meeting between Bilder and the other mothers who were busy raising their children, where ideas regarding childcare were being exchanged. He was also practicing death attribute magic at the same time. The food menu was mostly Japanese, consisting of miso soup containing katsubushi and wild vegetables, acorn powder udon and agar soaked in honey for dessert. He had first tried making katsubushi around this time last year, mass-producing failed products that had been made using a process based on his knowledge from Earth of over 20 years ago, but he had finally become able to make it successfully and reliably recently. I should have learned more about katsuobushi and smoking food. Well, I'd never imagined that I would be making katsuobushi in another world. He had tried to connect the pieces of his vague knowledge of the process from television and whatnot and executed it as best as he could, producing large quantities of failures as a result. He got the feeling that the fillets were supposed to be smoked near a charcoal fire, but it was likely that he remembered it incorrectly or the method he remembered was some kind of unorthodox one. As for the udon, it had been made using acorn flour that was smoother than wheat flour with the eggs of the giga bird that Gorbo had captured to bind the flour together. He had originally wanted to make ramen, but he had been unable to make lye water. Sodium carbonate and potassium carbonate are the main ingredients of lye water. In other words, it is a special kind of alkaline solution. Vandalay was currently trying to think of ways he might be able to make it. Even the spirits of the researchers in Origin that Vandalay had listened to hadn't made their own lye water. He was trying to devise a method, so he would likely be able to make it in a few years' time. Vandalay had been surprised to learn that noodles didn't exist in Lambda. There was no udon, soba, ramen, not even pasta. So when he had first made udon, everyone's impressions had been something along the lines of, "This bread is quite long and thin. It's interesting that you've used boiling water to make it." Well, that was why spreading the Japanese custom of slurping when eating udon and soba seemed like it would be fun. He had thought that there would be at least udon or pasta, but considering that there was no smoked food either, perhaps there were only simple foods and recipes in this world. Perhaps the reason was that the people hadn't had the freedom to invent them, or the fact that delicious monster meat and produce could be obtained from devil's nests, eliminating the need to invent such food. And the agar used for the dessert was something that Vandalay had made from tengasa, while the honey was, of course, from the cemetery bees. Vandalay had tamed, or rather, been forced to tame the cemetery bees, who were now building an enormous nest in Taylorsheim's royal castle. Even though it was winter, worker bees were being sent into the devil's nests to produce honey. Incidentally, the cemetery bees mainly ate meat. There was no problem with giving them the meat of monsters that wasn't suitable for eating, such as that of goblins. The honey of the cemetery bees had a powerful scent and rich taste. The combination of agar with this honey had become very popular. With things like tengasu and kombu being major food ingredients, the inhabitants of Taylorsheim were forced to reconsider their opinions on the value of seaweed. They required effort to make, however, as they couldn't be created through the cast of a spell like miso and fish sauce. "Come to think of it, Van, isn't it a bad idea to give honey to the children?" asked Bazdier. "This is honey that has had everything harmful to the body removed, so there's no problem," said Vandalay. Vandalay had used sterilization and disinfect to remove any components that could cause harm to the body from the honey while preserving its quality. It would be impossible for anyone to collapse from eating this honey, though he couldn't change the fact that one would gain weight if they ate too much of it. So I suppose it's fine for them to eat. You. The baby in her arms made a strange noise. "But it's still too early for you to eat baby food, Jadal." Bazdia readjusted the way she was holding the baby, who was reaching a hand out towards a plate full of honey-covered fruit, so that the baby was further away from it. Jadal was Bazdia's daughter who had been born towards the end of summer. Perhaps in return for Bazdia having gone through so much trouble getting pregnant, the birth and delivery had been surprisingly straightforward. Now Jadal was growing quickly. Her grey-brown, puffy cheeks were very adorable. "Jadal-chan has grown big, hasn't she?" said one of the other mothers. "Ah, are you trimming her claws properly?" "No, it seems like she hasn't grown any yet," replied Bazdia. "When did Vabi start growing them?" "For Vabi, I suppose it was just before she turned a year old. But sometimes they can grow them as early as 3 months after they're born, so make sure you trim them properly. Children can hurt themselves with their own claws, after all," said another mother. "Did that happen for you, King?" Vandalay started growing his claws after only 3 months, but he was already very smart by then, said Darsa. "Really? Smart at the age of 3 months, that's amazing. He was only a year old when he came to our village, so I think it's a bit late to be surprised." Darsa was smiling as she joined in on the conversation between the ghoul mothers. She had only been visible to Vandalay and the undead up until now, but now she was able to be seen by Bazdia, Bilda and the others as well as converse with them thanks to the visualization spell that Vandalay had invented, though it did make her appear rather transparent. He had thought that Darsa would be less stressed if she could communicate with others more smoothly, so he had created the spell with that in mind. Well, since it also made the whip marks and burns on her spirit visible, it would be difficult to use in human societies, unlike in Taylorsheim where everyone knew about her circumstances. Vandalay wanted to resurrect her and make this spell useless before entering human societies. Meanwhile, Vandalay was playing with the ghoul children nearby. Now, another of the ghoul babies made a noise. As ghoul boys had the heads of lions as soon as they were born, they looked just like kittens at this age. They didn't have paws, but they were very cute. Bone Man didn't seem to be able to deal with them, however. Vandali was really glad that he had instructed him not to harm any cats without thinking. "Papa. I'm not your papa," said Vandali. "I know you're really attached to me, but I'm not your papa. Let's make this very clear." Nina. That's right, Nin is correct. If by Nina you mean Nana-chan, you're absolutely right. I'm 3 years older than you. Nay, not nay, Nina. I'm not your Ani-chan. The king is kind of girlish, I guess, one of the ghoul mothers commented. Like the shape of his head. You're right, if he had the same skin color as us, you'd never think he's a boy, said another. As ghoul men had the heads of lions, from Bilder and the other mother's perspective, Vandali had feminine features and a girl's head. However, it seemed that this didn't apply for the undead titans like Balkasaur's Ran, who had large, robust bodies with beautiful muscles. Once my voice changes and I hit my second growth period, I'm sure I'll be like them, too. And by the time I'm an adult, I'll have a cleft chin, arms like logs, a broad chest, abdominal muscles like the caterpillar tracks of a tank, and thighs thicker than a woman's waist. I'll definitely be as macho as a Hollywood star. I have the superhuman strength skill that increases my muscle strength, so I'm sure of it. Probably, I hope. Poor Veena, with the other children riding on her back as if she were a horse, passed happily by Vandali as he was feeling strangely insecure about his future self. She was almost 1 year old, but she was already big enough to look 5 or 6. She was currently obsessed with letting the other children ride on her back. She was definitely not showing off her future promise of becoming a muscular individual right in front of Vandali. Come to think of it, what happened with clearing the mid-boss? Asked Bazdier. Once I'm finished with this break, I'll be going to challenge it for the 6th time, replied Vandali. Vandali had repeatedly lost to the mid-boss on the 20th floor of Borkus's Subdragon Savannah. Of course, it wasn't as if his life was put at risk during these fights. In a fight to the death, he would win. But simply based on the rules he had set, he was losing. He fought the mid-boss one-on-one. This included the restriction of the use of golems created through golem transmutation. On top of that, he wasn't allowed to use mana absorption barrier to rob the mid-boss of its mobility. The time limit he had set was determined by an hourglass, which took roughly 5 minutes for all of its sand to fall. Vandali had fought the Venom Wyvern under these rules 5 times. He couldn't land his attacks on the Venom Wyvern, and even if he did, they were ineffective, and 5 minutes would quickly pass. He had repeated this process several times. Using Disinfect removed the venom inside the Venom Wyvern's body, which meant that he didn't need to worry about being poisoned until it produced the venom again. His impact negating barrier was more than enough to stop the Venom Wyvern's direct attacks. But Vandali's attacks hadn't been able to deal a decisive blow, either. At first, he had tried using the no-attribute spell, Flight, to match his opponent, but he had been completely unable to keep up. If it were just a matter of speed, he would have been able to move faster by simply spending a great amount of mana, but the Venom Wyvern was far superior when it came to performing tight turns. To begin with, the no-attribute spell, Flight, was simply a spell that used telekinesis to move the caster's body. It wasn't a match for the skillful, complicated flying techniques of the Venom Wyvern that employed the use of wind attribute mana in its wings. And then he had tried defeating it from a distance. He had tried aiming at it with mana bullets, but this had failed due to their problematic range and projectile speed. At any rate, mana that wasn't affected by any attribute dispersed easily. The mana bullet spell was a spell that gathered such mana to prevent its dispersion as much as possible. However, there were limits to how much he could prevent it from dispersing. Their range was only several dozen meters normally, and even when Vandali poured 10,000 mana into a single projectile, it didn't even last 100 meters. Even using multicast to release multiple mana bullets at the same time had the same result. Their speed was inferior even to arrows, never mind bullets fired from the guns on Earth, and their trajectory was linear, making them very easy to avoid. Dodging them was child's play for the Venom Wyvern that could fly in any direction at high speeds. Vandali had tried methods like twisting the shape of the mana bullets to alter their trajectory, but still none of them had managed to hit. If they did, they had enough destructive power to burst the Venom Wyvern's flesh and organs, however. In any case, as Vandali was unable to engage it in close quarters combat and mana bullets were ineffective. This meant that he was left with the indirect methods of poisoning it, infecting it with disease, using Soul Break to somehow take its mana away, and distracting it with a lemur to create an opening. But even when he had managed to get poison created using his deadly poison spell into the Venom Wyvern's eyes and mouth, It wasn't effective as it seemed to possess the poison resistance skill. Things had gone well when he had done the same thing with disease, but 5 minutes passed before the disease began to work. Soul Break was a skill that had no effect if Vandali couldn't land any physical or magical attacks on the enemy, and since the mana drained by the skill was equal to the amount of damage dealt to the body, he couldn't drain any of the Venom Wyvern's mana. Though lemures had worked on lesser wyverns, the Venom Wyvern hadn't shown any large openings despite being surprised by the bloodthirst that the lemur suddenly produced. And then Vandali had remembered his battle against Serkrent and amplified his impact-negating barrier at the moment of the Venom Wyvern's attack, managing to trap its claws and tail in the barrier and creating an opening for the first time. But before he had managed to move into an attack, it twisted its long neck to bite off the tip of its tail and its trapped paw to escape. It was even more resolute than Serkrent had been. This wasn't something that even a wild animal would be able to do immediately. It was only its fighting instincts as the mid-boss of a dungeon and the knowledge that it would die instantly if one of Vandali's mana bullets struck its torso that allowed it to do this. And after that, the 5-minute time limit passed again. After their battles, Balkus and the others had quickly dealt with the Venom Wyvern, continued on to defeat the dungeon boss on the 30th floor and taken the loot in the treasure chamber. This had given him experience and caused him to level up. "I can definitely win next time," said Vandali. "Vandali, you don't have to be in such a hurry, you know," said Darsa. "If I'm resurrected 5 years, 10 years or even 100 years from now, I don't mind." "It's alright," said Vandali. "I say this every time, but it'll be alright this time." Darsa seemed uncertain, but Vandali knew he had a chance to win this time. He had gotten an idea for altering the mana bullet spell to create a new death attribute spell. Vandali had thought that death attribute magic had limited ways to deal damage directly to enemies, but if there were limited ways, he just had to invent some. He had postponed the didn't gain any experience from defeating enemies himself, but he could devote his efforts to it if necessary. As a result, he had successfully finished developing a new spell yesterday. This spell was a projectile affected by the death attribute with long range, high speed and a difficult-to-read trajectory. "I'll definitely win next time. There won't be a 7th time," Vandali declared confidently. Unlike the regular monsters, mid-bosses and bosses that appear in dungeons are produced by the dungeon's core. That is why no matter how many times a boss is defeated, once a certain amount of time passes, a monster of equal strength appears in its place. Shwilla. 7 enormous snake heads large enough to swallow a cow whole were coiling around each other. However, there was only one tail. It is one of the dragon races, a serpent with multiple heads. When this creature hatches from its egg it has 2 heads and is the size of a Japanese rat snake, but the number of heads increases as it develops, as does the size of its body, the hardness of its scales, its regenerative abilities and the potency of its venom. And once it matures to adulthood, it becomes an enormous 7-headed serpent known as a hydra. It is rank 6, superior to wyverns among the dragon races. Its intelligence is not much different from a normal snake and it is far less mobile than wyverns. However, its powerful body can mow down a human with ease, and it is difficult to wound it through its scales with normal methods. And the substance secreted from its fangs is a potent venom that cannot be removed without a special antidote. And what makes this creature difficult to kill is its resilience that keeps it alive unless all of its heads are cut off and its heart is destroyed. If only one of these 2 steps are taken, its regenerative ability will allow it to make a full recovery in a matter of days. Incidentally, hydras can develop even further to grow an 8th head, becoming known as a Noki. Its name was no doubt given to it by one of the champions from another world. "I want a rematch," said Vandali, seeing the hydra that had appeared for his 6th attempt at fighting a mid-boss of Balkus's sub-dragon Savannah. "No, that's probably impossible," said Balkus, denying him immediately. "But I just invented a new spell to deal with the Venom Wyvern's mobility." The hydra was less intelligent and less mobile than a normal wyvern. Of course, it couldn't even compare to the higher rank version, the Venom Wyvern. "There's nothing to be done about it," Balkus told him. It was actually really unusual that the same monster spawned 5 times in a row as the mid-boss in the first place. Normally, the race of mid-bosses and bosses that appear in dungeons are not fixed. They tend to be of around the same general strength, but they are generated randomly by the dungeon. This dungeon would generate rank 6 dragon or dinosaur type mid-bosses. The Venom Wyvern was probably one of the stronger monsters that could have been generated. The reason it had appeared 5 times in a row was due to Vandali's bad luck. "It's not like that Hydra's going to back down now," said Balkus. "Try it out. That new spell of yours. Sure Death Bullet. As Vandali lifted a hand towards the hydra that was raising its curved necks, a black object resembling shimmering hot air appeared at his palm. He fired the death bullet at the hydra that had sensed some extraordinary presence and was trying to escape. The death bullet consisted of death attribute mana capable of draining an enemy's life force, condensed using the same principle as the mana bullet. He couldn't fire them consecutively because he still wasn't used to casting the spell, but their range and speed were on another level. They also had a homing ability that allowed them to chase targets to a certain extent. Shijia. However, the death bullet's projectile speed and homing ability proved unnecessary as it hit the hydra with ease. A scream rose from the hydra as its vitality was drained, and its heads began lowering towards the ground one by one. Vandali fired multiple more death bullets, and once all of its heads were lying on the ground, he fired one last death bullet at its heart to deal the final blow. What remained was the corpse of a hydra that was dead despite being completely unwounded. "Oh, that's pretty amazing," said Borkus. "Considering that the amount of mana I spent was equivalent to the entire mana pools of 100 first-rate mages." "Not really," said Vandali. "That might be true, but that's less than 1% for you, isn't it? Anyway, you should be happy. You beat a mid-boss in less than a minute, never mind the 5-minute time limit." "I did, but you don't need to be so focused on the Venom Wyvern. The main thing is, you just need to become strong enough that the Dragon Golem won't kill you straight away," Borkus reminded him. "Isn't that right?" "You're right, but I still can't feel satisfied." Still, as Borkus says, clearing this dungeon repeatedly until the Venom Wyvern appears is wandering too far away from my goal. So I guess this will do. The Dragon Golem is next. The levels of the death attribute charm, strength and followers, no attribute magic, mana control, cooking and unarmed fighting technique skills have increased. You have acquired the long distance control skill. Name, Vandali race, Damper, Dark Elf age, 4 years old title: Ghoul King job, death attribute mage level, 100 job history, non-attributes, vitality, 90 mana, 204,506,933 strength, 67 agility, 46 stamina, 71 intelligence, 233 passive skills, superhuman strength, level 1 rapid healing, level 3 death attribute magic, level 5 status effect resistance, level 5 magic resistance, level 1 dark vision mental corruption, level 10 death attribute charm, level 5, level up. Chant revocation, level 3 strength and followers, level 6, level up. Automatic mana recovery, level 3, active skills, blood sucking, level 3 surpass limits, level 4 golem transmutation, level 4 no attribute magic, level 4, level up. Mana control, level 4, level up. Spirit form, level 2 carpentry, level 4 engineering, level 3 cooking, level 2, level up. Alchemy, level 3 unarmed fighting technique, level 2, level up. Soul break, level 1 multicast, level 1 long distance control, level 1, new. Curses, experience gained in previous life not carried over, cannot learn existing jobs, unable to gain experience independently. Chapter 50, The Battle Against the Dragon Golem that was 70% destroyed by the hero. Since Vandali's teeth attribute Mage job had reached level 100 after his 6th clearing of Borkus's sub-dragon savannah, he headed for the job-changing room in the Adventurers Guild for the first time in over a year. "Give me some fish sauce for this. Miso as well. Katsuobushi and kombu for me. Is there any honey? I want some wasabi, too. Give me some acorn powder. The Giga eggs are sold out, huh? Then at least give me some meal. Ammonite is fine as well." The Adventurers Guild had been turned into a place where the food that Vandali had invented, including the flavorings and kombu, was being distributed and traded. People would come here to receive a rationed amount, and if they wanted any more than that, they would have to barter using materials that they had gathered from the devil's nests. Requests for goods had been posted on a board so that the goods in short supply would be replenished, so it appeared as if the Adventurers Guild had begun operating again. If real adventurers guilds were full of ghouls and undead like this, going in and out would be easy, Vandali said to himself. Leaving that wishful thinking aside, the ghouls and undead titans would be able to make acorn powder themselves without having to trade for it, though the flavorings would be impossible for them. When asked why they came to trade for it instead, these were the responses they gave. Hey, we get miso, fish sauce, kombu and agar distributed for free, and if we want more, all we have to do is pick up monster materials, magic stones and ingredients like acorns and bring them into trade. Why should we have to spend time making it on our own? You have to break acorns, soak them in water for 3 days and then dry them before turning them into powder, right? Killing monsters is easier. It seemed that the undead titans and ghouls' sense of manual labor was very different to that of the humans on Earth. Well, it's much easier to go into a devil's nest and hunt an orc than raise a pig from birth for its meat, so I understand how they feel. Vandali seems to have been raised into quite the hunter himself. Incidentally, the amount of products Vandali was producing had increased, so he had built a special manufacturing facility for things like acorn powder and walnut sauce. He had used his alchemy skill to make magic items imbued with spells like withering for drying and decomposition to decompose the flesh of the walnuts. Golems were set up in lanes to perform tasks like smashing, cooking and powdering the ingredients, so there was a lane of golems for making acorn powder and one for making walnut sauce. Seeing the golems shaped like mortars and other equipment at work reminded Vandali of factories on Earth. The only fuel required was mana, so it was very economically and environmentally friendly. And in an emergency, the golems would change shape to participate in battle. It was a wonderful, environmentally friendly factory that didn't require any maintenance. I wonder if I can industrialize the Nora and Agar as well. If I made more labor necessary, it would create more jobs in the future, but the ghouls and titans are hunters, so maybe I don't need to worry? But in a few decades from now, there will be black goblins and Anubises who have aged and can't fight anymore. Vandali contemplated these truly complicated factors. Well, let's leave thinking about the societal system for later on. So, the job change. I suppose I'll be a golem transmuter now. Vandali could only acquire undiscovered jobs due to the cannot learn existing jobs curse. During his previous job change, golem transmuter was the available job that had appeared alongside death attribute mage. So he would definitely be able to undergo a job change now. He calmed himself down and coolly reached out to touch the crystal ball in the job changing room. Jobs that can be selected: golem transmuter, undead tamer, soulbreaker, venom fist user and zect user. There's a lot more. Vandali whispered in astonishment at the 5 jobs displayed in his head. It seemed that among the 3 curses Rodcourty had placed on him, this one was the most pointless. Well, it will probably cause trouble for me in the future. The reason Undead Tamer hadn't appeared previously is probably because I wasn't aware that undead can't normally be tamed until I heard about it from Eleonora. It's strange to think that whether the job is displayed or not is dependent on whether I'm aware of this fact, but it's probably something like that. It seems self-explanatory that this job will provide bonuses to undead-related skills, but many tamer-type jobs apparently don't provide a lot of bonuses to attribute values. Soulbreaker is clearly a job that was appeared because I acquired the Soulbreaker skill after destroying Serkrent's soul. Soulbreak is a skill that applies its effects to all of my attacks. Wouldn't this job probably give me bonuses to a wide range of both magic-related and martial-type skills? As for its attribute value bonuses, I have no idea. It seems like it would increase strength and intelligence, though. And Venom Fist user, what is it? Could it be a job that appears for someone who uses death attribute magic after reaching a certain level with the unarmed fighting technique skill and killing a certain number of enemies with poison? It seems like it would probably give bonuses to unarmed fighting technique, strength, agility and stamina, but it seems like the kind of job that would make people refuse to shake hands with me. It would break my heart if people refused a handshake or wiped their hands with a handkerchief after shaking my hand. There's no doubt that Insect User has appeared because I tamed the cemetery bees. Its bonuses to skills and attribute values are probably the same as Undead Tamer, except applying to insects instead of undead. It would be a good job if it increases the amount of honey the bees produce. It might even be interesting to tame rhinoceros beetles and stag beetles so I can call myself the king of insects that I couldn't become on Earth. But I'm going with Golem Transmuter this time. Because the opponent I'm fighting next is a dragon golem. There were no stories telling what kind of inorganic mineral the golem was made of, and abrasill couldn't be used through the ice. There was a chance that the golem transmutation skill would be useful against the golem that was made of an unknown substance. Controlling it directly would be impossible, but the place where Vandali would be fighting it was a large yet finite space. There was a floor, walls and, most importantly, a ceiling. In addition, the golem's wings had been broken. There was no chance that it would be able to fly freely. If I turn the floor and walls into golems and manipulate them, I should be able to rob the dragon golem of its freedom or at least slow its movements down. Golem transmutation was useful when I killed Sir Krent and his subordinates. I've used it to develop golems that manufacture acorn powder and walnut sauce as well as repair Talersheim's walls and royal castle. This skill should become important in helping me survive longer and making my life richer. You have selected Golem Transmuter. The levels of the strengthened followers and Golem transmutation skills have increased. Name, Vandali race, Damper, Dark Elf age, 4 years old title : Ghoul King job, Golem Transmuter level, 0 job history, death attribute Mage attributes, vitality, 90 mana, 204,506,933 strength, 67 agility, 46 stamina, 71 intelligence, 238 passive skills, superhuman strength, level 1 rapid healing, level 3 death attribute magic, level 5 status effect resistance, level 5 magic resistance, level 1 dark vision mental corruption, level 10 death attribute charm, level 5 chant revocation, level 3 strengthen followers, level 7, level up. Automatic mana recovery, level 3, active skills, blood sucking, level 3 surpass limits, level 4 Golem transmutation, level 5, level up. No attribute magic, level 4 mana control, level 4 spirit form, level 2 carpentry, level 4 engineering, level 3 cooking, level 2 alchemy, level 3 unarmed fighting technique, level 2 soul break, level 1 multicast, level 1 long range control, level 1 curses, experience gained in previous life not carried over, cannot learn existing jobs, unable to gain experience independently. When Vandali checked his status, he found that his attribute values hadn't increased as much as they had when he acquired the death attribute Mage job. Well, that's probably just how the difference between a first job change and a second one is. Now then, time to go below the royal castle. Vandali paused and reconsidered. Before that, I need to test out my Golem transmutation skill now that it's leveled up, and I should ask everyone how they're feeling now that my strengthened followers skill has leveled up as well. Vandali inspected the Golem transmutation skill to find that it cost him less mana than before to create golems. If he were to cross the boundary mountain range again, he would be able to create the paths to do so at twice the speed that he had managed the first time. In the future, I might be moving the mountains out of the way rather than creating paths or digging a tunnel, though I won't do it that carelessly, because it would be troublesome if I happen to come across some magma. I don't know anything about this world's geographical structure, anyway. Also, his golems had become stronger. It seemed that his golems had started being affected by strengthened followers. They wouldn't be able to put up a fight against the dragon golem, but they would probably be useful in the future. You really mustn't push yourself too hard, said Darsa. If you think it's too dangerous, you have to run away immediately, okay? That's what I intend to do, Mom, Vandali assured her. Botchan, may fortune be with you, said Sam. But it is also courage to escape when the situation calls for it. If the situation calls for it, I'll open a hole in the wall and come running back. Vandali and his carefully selected companions headed below the royal castle as Darsa and the others saw them off. The enemy they would be facing was the dragon golem. The hero who had been said to be destined to become S-class, a hero so powerful that he had killed Balkus with a single attack, had not been able to defeat this enemy. Its head, right arm, wings and tail had been destroyed, cracks were running all across its body and the magic spear was even still embedded in its chest. But even so, this was a powerful enemy for Vandali and his party to face. That was why Vandali had only chosen those who were rank 6 or above, those who could be revived by being placed in a new body if their current one was damaged, and those that Vandali was using to soak up damage. The rank 9 Balkus and the rank 8 Eleonora were obvious choices. Next were Zadyrus and Vigoro, who were rank 6. And then there was Bone Man, Bone Wolf, Bone Monkey, Bone Bear, Bone Bird, Saria and Rita. There were still only rank 5, but their bodies were made of bones and suits of armor. Even if they were smashed into tiny pieces, they could be revived once Vandali prepared new bones and suits of armor. And as for meat shields, or rather, stone shields, Vandali was bringing 10 stone golems with him. This was a precaution that he was taking just in case the available materials in the dragon golem's chamber were brittle or they had been magically altered in a way that would make them difficult to turn into golems. They would sacrifice their bodies to slow the golem's movements and act as shields. They were made of the spirits of the orcs and goblins from Bogoggan's village, so Vandali intended to exploit them fully. Depending on what the dragon golem is made of, I'm afraid that it might be able to attack spirits, so please be very careful, Vandali warned his party. The wall of cursed ice is still in place, so I still don't know what the dragon golem is made of. I'm sure it's not going to be made of simple iron. If it's made of mithril, which has strong anti-magic properties, it will be hard for me and Zadyrus to make an impact with our spells, said Vandali. Mithril can damage spirits as well. If that's the case, we'll be completely reliant on the physical attacks of Borkus and the others. It would be a relief if it were made of adamantite, since we wouldn't have to worry about it damaging spirits. But if it's made of adamantite, my sword won't be able to cut it. The situation would be reversed. We'd be reliant on your magical attacks, kid, said Borkus, tapping his fingers against the handle of Bogoggan's magic sword that he had received from Vandali. His sword was simply a magic sword with enhanced sharpness and strength, but its attacks were quite powerful. With this sword in hand, Borkus would be able to slice through the scales of an earth dragon with ease. Is it really that hard? Asked Vigoro, swallowing nervously upon hearing that even Borkus's sword wouldn't be able to cut through it. You bet, said Borkus. It's a magical metal so hard that even the scales and bones of inferior dragons are nothing like it. If you tried comparing iron to it, the iron might as well be slime. But if that is the case, Vandali Sama's spells will be effective, said Eleonora. There is also the option of pulling that spear out and using it. Also, we have no choice but to aim for the cracks in its body, Zadyrus added. Well, if its movements are slow, the boy simply needs to bury it in the floor. There are other options. Like using the broken pieces of the dragon golem that are lying around. Since they'll be made of the same material as the golem itself, they should at least serve as shields, said Vandali as he and his companions walked through the underground passage. There were still broken fragments of ice littered across the ground. Despite this being the one place in Taylorsheim that not even a single undead entered for 200 years, it was the most ominous place in the city. However, Vandali had melted all of the walls of ice that served as barriers to enter. There was now nothing in their way. Then they arrived in front of the dragon golem's chamber. They could see a dragon made of a black metal through the ice. The danger of death is less than it was before, but it's still there, said Vandali. What will we do? Shall we postpone this venture? Asked Saria. No, we'll press on, replied Vandali. It's a golem that defeated someone who almost possessed the power of an S-class adventurer. There's no way that we'll defeat it without facing any danger. In order to defeat the golem that was carefully made by the goddess herself without facing any danger, Vandali would either need to become more powerful than an S-class adventurer or make Borkus and the others all as strong as S-class adventurers. Vandali had gone from being a powerless baby with nothing but a large mana pool to becoming this powerful in a little over 4.5 years, but there was no telling how many years, how many decades it would take him to achieve that power. Darsa had told him not to push himself, but Vandali had no intention of waiting that long. I want to celebrate my birthday this year with a mother who has a physical body, Vandali thought as he cast enchantments on his party members. Zadyrus and Eleonora cast their own spells as well. Everyone had their physical and magical damage resistance increased by Vandali's energy absorption. Their weapons had their attack power increased by Zadyrus's Blade of Wind enchantment and their agility enhanced by her Blessing of Wind. Just in case, she cast Arrow Evasion, which made it easier to dodge projectile attacks and offensive spells. It was a little regrettable that many of the party members were undead, so she couldn't use light attribute enchantments on them. Eleonora's time attribute spell, Acceleration, allowed them to move even faster. Finally, Vandali transferred mana to Zadyrus and Eleonora until they were full, and then their preparations were complete. Other than Borkus's magic sword and Vigoro's axe, everyone's equipment had been enhanced by monster materials and items obtained in the treasure chambers of cleared dungeons. Many pieces of their equipment were enhanced by earth dragon or rock dragon materials, or made of black steel, a lower value magical metal. Bone Wolf let out a growl. He and the other undead were the ones making the most extravagant use out of those materials. All of the major bones in their bodies had been replaced by those of dragons whose shape had been changed to match their skeletons. Even an ogre would be incapable of breaking their bones now. Well then, let's go, said Vandali. He raised a hand and began sucking the mana out of the wall of ice. It was thicker than the other walls of ice he had removed, but the difference wasn't great and the ice began melting steadily. The dragon golem sensed this and made a loud, slow movement. Sideways. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds passed. It wasn't retreating or approaching, it simply continued sideways and stopped in front of its own severed head that was on the ground. Could it be, it's going to pick it up and put it back on? This is bad. Everyone, split left and right and retreat. Vandali ordered. Vandali obeyed the warnings his instincts gave him and stopped his spell. Everyone followed his command and split into two groups. The shining black head of a dragon came flying through. The dragon golem had kicked its own head to launch it as a projectile weapon. It's quite the smart golem. Borkus spat as he avoided the dragon's head that had smashed the ice like brittle glass and destroyed all of the stone golems that were supposed to be their meat shields. And that's the metal of the gods, Orichalcum. The fact that it destroyed the cursed ice that only Vandali-sama should have been able to remove is proof of that. Eleonora said in a slightly trembling voice, making it clear what the dragon golem was made of. Orichalcum, mithril, adamantite, Damascus steel, black steel, all of these magical metals are high-quality materials, the most precious metals in this world. It is said that only the gods can handle them. One of these precious metals made up the entirety of the dragon golem's 30-meter-long body. Using it for weapons and equipment is one thing, but what an amazing goddess, using it for a golem larger than a dinosaur, said Eleonora. If we brought all of that back, we'd be able to buy a country, said Rita. Well then, please bring it back, said Vandali. Rita, Saria, Bone Man, everyone, please gather the pieces of that golem, Vandali ordered as he dashed into the chamber behind Borkus and Eleonora. Letting out a noise that was difficult to tell whether it was a roar or the sound of creaking metal, the dragon golem thrashed around with dull but powerful movements. Dragon Slayer. Borkus struck the dragon golem with his prided, most powerful martial skill, but though it made a loud impact against its cracked arm, he didn't manage to cause any new damage. Cheat. Gah! Borkus swore as he was repelled by the dragon golem's arm and sent flying like a ball in a sports match. The enchantments that had been placed on him broke like fragile glass. There's no way you can get through Orichalcum that's even harder than adamantite, is there? Eleonora said in exasperation as she flew through the air, trying to find an opening. Her objective was, of course, the spear embedded in the golem's chest. I'll pull it out and use it as a weapon. Even if I can't do that, if I thrust it deeper into the golem, it should deal some damage. Vital spots exist for golems other than those created by Vandali. Their heads or bodies contain cores that are the source of the mana that powers them. A golem handmade by a goddess should be no exception. Since the golem already has no head, the core should be somewhere in that body. If it's broken, the golem will stop moving. If I'm going to aim for anything, it has to be that. The current situation, Borkus was being stopped by Vandali's impact negating barrier before he hit the wall. Vigoro had decided to give up on attacking after seeing Borkus's sword have no effect, and it seemed that he was now devoting himself to acting as bait. Zadyrus was attacking with wind and light attribute spells, but they were having no effect against the massive Orichalcum that had even greater anti-magic properties than mithril. The ones who were playing the biggest role were probably Bone Wolf and the other undead. Roared Bone Bear. They had been unable to increase their ranks to surpass being rotten beasts, but Vandali had flooded them with his mana to cause them to become rank 5 hellbeasts and, in Bone Bird's case, a hellbird. All of the bones of their bodies were now the crimson color of fresh blood. Their crimson bodies were picking up broken pieces of the dragon golem in their jaws, scooping them up in their arms and dragging them along with their claws to gather them up. This was to make sure that the dragon golem wouldn't use them as projectile weapons like it had done with its own head, and also so that they could be used. Botjan, do you think that you could make a golem with this? Ritu asked incredulously. It's repelling my mana, turning it into a golem is impossible, replied Vandali. It seemed that it would be difficult to use directly. Vandali-sama, stop the golem's movements! Shouted Eleonora, as if to say that this would be her time to shine. Vandali answered her request by using golem transmutation to turn the floor into a golem. Countless arms extended from the floor and grasped the dragon golem's legs. However, the dragon golem moved with a creak and they broke like twigs. Its movements were slow, but its power was extraordinary. However, it began focusing on trying to destroy the floor-turned golem at its feet. Its decision-making ability seemed to be flawed from having lost its head, or perhaps it found the floor golem extremely irritating. This is it. Eleonora used super acceleration to accelerate the flow of time around herself and flew towards the dragon golem's chest. She forcefully took hold of the spear's handle, and pushed dash. Gah! Eleonora let out a gasp as an icicle made of cursed ice appeared from the magic spear she had grasped and pierced her chest. She had been aware that artifacts often rejected anyone other than their owners when touched. Impossible, even after 200 years. However, she hadn't expected that this weapon would still respond over 200 years after its owner had perished. The icicle had pierced Eleonora's heart magnificently. There was no saving her. But Vandali would likely raise her as an undead after her death and make use of her. In that case, I should push this magic spear even a little deeper into the golem while I'm still alive, for the sake of my master who is the most fearsome being in this world. For this purpose, Eleonora produced mana bullets behind her and released them at both herself and the magic spear. Even if the magic spear itself is made of orichalcum, even if it's covered in cursed ice that won't let anyone near it, I should be able to push it at least a little deeper with this. But the mana bullets she had created with the last of her strength vanished. New area. Dragon Slayer. Iron Tear. Circular Axe Whip. Borkus and Vigoro, wielding misshapen lumps of metal that couldn't be called swords or axes, struck the dragon golem with them. The dragon golem's body creaked and the cracks in its surface began to spread. Even as Leonora felt surprise at this sight, her consciousness became distant and then the icicle was broken and tossed away. The next thing she knew, Vandali was looking down at her. "I'm sorry. I could sense the danger, but I couldn't stop you in time," he said. "But please don't try to accomplish things at the cost of your own life." Kaiapolo Eleonora tried to apologize while coughing blood. "It would be best if you don't talk," Vandali told her. And then his claws grew longer right before her eyes. "Because my body is small, this is all that I can give you." Vandali's blood dripped onto Eleonora's face. She reacted instinctively to the smell of its rich mana, opened her mouth and accepted it. Her heart began to regenerate rapidly. It should have been impossible for her heart to recover after being destroyed to this extent. "I kept your death away," Vandali explained. "As long as I have my mana, no wound is fatal. I'm sure it hurts, but please do your best to heal." "It's already healed," said Eleonora. "Thanks to your blood," she added. "To think that I made a complete recovery after having my heart pierced through." Eleonora could feel power flowing throughout her entire body just from licking the remainders of Vandali's blood on her lips. If Vandali hadn't ordered Eleonora to use her normal tone of speech, she would have been praising him as her lord and expressing her gratitude and loyalty by kissing his feet. However, this was a time where she should express her loyalty through her work. "Give me a sword as well," she said. Please wait a moment." Vandali was unable to create a sword for her right away. He was currently casting 3 spells simultaneously. He had attached handles to broken orichalcum fragments that Bone Bear and the other undead had gathered and barely managed to alter the shapes of the lumps of metal so that at least the swordsmanship and axe technique skills could be used with them, forming crudely made orichalcum weapons. They were trying to return to their original shape like a memory alloy, so the 2 instances of golem transmutation that he was using for the 2 weapons to prevent that were 2 spells. Transforming the floor into a golem to impair the dragon golem's movements was another spell. Making Eleonora's weapon would be the 4th. Maintaining the shape of the orichalcum fragments was using up a particularly large amount of his mana. "Boy, you are so hot that my hands are almost burning," Zediris warned him. She was helping alleviate his symptoms by casting healing magic on his head. "Please bear with it for a little while longer," said Vandali. "No, won't you worry about yourself a little more?" Zediris sighed. "It's alright, surpass limits is still taking effect." "Boy, surely you are not under the impression that you can surpass your limits endlessly?" Zediris showed her anger while wearing a smile. "I don't need a sword anymore. I'll sit here quietly and watch," said Eleonora, taking back her request. Vandali decided to obey their wishes and stay put as well. "And it seems that things will be fine even if we just watch from now on." With each swing of Borkus and Vigoro's crude weapons, the cracks in the dragon golem's body grew larger and deeper. The stone golems that Vandali had rebuilt were acting as decoys for the dragon golem's counterattacks, and each time more pieces of orichalcum broke off its body, Bone Monkey and the other undead gathered and discarded them so that the golem couldn't use them as projectile weapons. The dragon golem that had limited options for attacking and dulled movements after being more than half destroyed by Mikhail wasn't even an enemy now that a method of inflicting damage to it had been found. The only thing to be careful of now was the self-protecting mechanism of the magic spear that had pierced Eleonora's heart. Borkus and Vigoro simply needed to make sure they didn't accidentally touch it, so it wasn't a substantial threat. With a loud sound, the dragon golem's right leg collapsed. Half of its one remaining arm dropped onto the ground. And then its torso followed, crumbling as the dragon golem fell. They had won. Everyone believed it. The only casualties were the stone golems. Borkus, Vigoro and the undead let out a shout of victory. Vandali didn't doubt their victory either. He looked towards the door on the wall far behind where the dragon golem had stood. The resurrection device that he had been unable to search for up until now was likely behind that door. With this, he would be able to resurrect Darsa. But then that confident belief turned into fear. Run! Countless icicles exploded outwards from the dragon golem, drowning out Vandali's shouted warning. Chapter 51, You're an Enemy. Icicles extended with explosive force from the cracks in the dragon golem's torso. Vandali and Eleonora were far away, but Vigoro and the others had been caught up in it with no chance to react. Bone Wolf and Bone Bird let out screams as the icicles pierced them, while bones and pieces of armor flew and rolled across the ground all the way over to Vandali. Vandali's eyes met with those of a skull that had landed nearby. "Bone Man, what about your other parts?" he asked. "Jiu. My lower half is on the other side and my left arm has been swallowed by the ice. The rest is all around this area," replied Bone Man, his lower jaw and teeth clattering energetically. It seemed that he had split himself into pieces to escape the icicles. "As expected of an undead," said Zadyrus. "I've started to lose confidence in my own immortality," said Eleonora. The two of them smiled bitterly with relief and looked up to see Ritu and Saria, who were combining their armor pieces to make up a single suit of armor now that they lacked the parts to make two. Vigoro was unharmed and Borkus was getting onto his feet, despite having now properly lost half of his head rather than just his face. It seemed that there was surprisingly little damage done. "Those icicles that cursed ice moved with the dragon golem's fragments that cover it like armor," said Vandali. "The surface of the ice has orichalcum fragments in it, so it nullified my energy absorption and Zadyrus's arrow evasion. On top of that, the cursed ice was a special substance that only orichalcum and Vandali's death attribute magic could break down." Bone Man and some of the other undead had managed to avoid the icicles by splitting themselves into pieces, but Bone Monkey and Bone Bear had instinctively tried to stop the ice to no avail. Bone Bird, who was missing a leg, gave a sorrowful cry. Vandali saw the crimson color of Bone Monkey's femur fade away, returning to its original white color. "My lord," Bone Man began. "I know." Vandali used spirit form transformation on his right hand, connected it to the spirits of Bone Monkey, Bone Bear and Bone Wolf and poured his mana into them to preserve their damaged spirits. Their spirits had been gravely wounded by the orichalcum, and though it was possible to heal them, it would be difficult to have them return to fighting shape right away. "Is everyone all right?" shouted Vigoro. "Tch. My good looks have been ruined," Borkus lamented. They were both still holding their weapons, which were crude and barely weapon-shaped at all. But they were still weapons made of orichalcum. They had managed to block the orichalcum-covered icicles with these to protect themselves. "Here you are, Rita Joutjan," said Borkus. "Thank you," replied Rita. While Vigoro was unharmed, the skull-like right half of Borkus's face had been broken because he had immediately grabbed the bra portion of Rita's bikini armor. "I was thinking about how embarrassing it would be to fight in front of everyone with my chest exposed," she continued. "Chest? You say there's nothing there," said Borkus, seemingly disappointed at the fact that Rita was still just a spirit other than her armor, but it seemed that she had no intention of being upset by his remark. "Once my spirit form skill levels up like father's, you will be able to see it," she told him. "Botjan, what will we do now?" "Let's see, is there anyone who can explain this situation?" Vandali asked. "I can speculate," said Eleonora, pointing a finger towards the combined mass of the ice and the remains of the golem. It had begun writhing and creaking after icicles had exploded outwards. She was pointing at the magic spear that was still embedded in the dragon golem's chest. "That magic spear, Ice Age, has probably gone wild. The dragon golem has been stopping its functions up until now, but I'm sure it took mana from the dragon golem's core to release that explosion of ice. I couldn't have imagined that it would be capable of doing something like this, nor that its self-protection mechanism would still be functioning. In other words, it seemed that it was all Mikhail's fault." "Then do you know what's going to happen to it now?" asked Vandali. "I don't know what has caused the magic spear to go wild or how exactly it is receiving power from the golem's core, but if it's just on a rampage with no purpose, it will keep thrashing around indiscriminately until it runs out of mana." "Indiscriminately?" Vandali repeated. "I see. Into the walls or the floor, or perhaps towards the resurrection device beyond the door." The headless dragon golem, whose legs had sprouted orichalcum-tipped icicles like the legs of an octopus or a squid, or rather, the magic spear, Ice Age, was doing something far more terrible than Eleonora's prediction. It was moving directly behind it, towards the resurrection device. "We must stop that rotten spear," said Vandali. There was now no other choice. There would be no point in reorganizing another party to come back, the resurrection device would already be destroyed by then. Yeah? Leave it to me, shouted Borkus. He and Vigoro began running, crude orichalcum weapons in hand. Since the ice was cursed ice, only they and Vandali could deal a decisive blow to Ice Age. Their attacks landed in an interesting way. The legs made of ice made no attempt to avoid the attacks, they were broken and pieces of ice scattered across the floor. However, no matter how much they broke, the amount of ice wasn't decreasing. There's no end to this, said Vigoro. It's the mana. As long as that golem's course still contains mana, that spear will keep making more ice, said Borkus. As Ice Age's ice was not a part of its body like a golem, no matter how much of it broke, there was no damage to Ice Age itself. Since it was using the ice as limbs, breaking it would slow down its movement, but that would be nothing more than stalling for time. Vandali was trying to stop it as well by turning the floor into a golem, but the ice crushed it easily and continued onwards, slowly but surely. Then I'll smash the spear itself. Instant response. Borkus moved with a speed that was difficult to imagine possible for his enormous body, running up the ice and closing the distance to Ice Age itself. However, before he could get close enough for his weapon to reach it, countless icicles appeared and were launched towards him. Cheat. The ice near the spear is damn fast. Faced with this machine gun fire of icicles, even Borkus had no choice but to stop and fall back. But as the icicles were being fired straight after being created, there were no orichalcum fragments included in the attack. Even if they hit Borkus, they wouldn't really cause any serious damage as he was a zombie. However, it seemed that the icicles stayed under Ice Age's control after being fired. He could see that they writhed unpleasantly after being repelled by his sword. If they hit him and pinned him down, he would be immobilized until Vandali melted them for him. Damn it. I couldn't defeat the weapon's owner and now I can't even win against the weapon itself? Borkus bellowed. He wasn't giving up, he began looking for another opportunity. Vandali, we need more help. Vigoro was still breaking the legs made of ice away from the spear to buy more time. Both of them were probably aiming to make it run out of mana. However, the ice being generated by Ice Age showed no signs of weakening. I can't bear to watch this any longer, said Eleonora, picking up an orichalcum fragment and flying into battle. Rita, we're going to, said Saria. The two of them picked up one of the orichalcum fragments that were shaped more appropriately and followed Eleonora's lead. And then they began attacking Ice Age's legs with that orichalcum fragment. Its shape wasn't very good for using as a weapon, but fortunately the two of them possessed considerable physical strength. Smashing the orichalcum into the ice with all of their strength was enough to break it. Eleonora used her large orichalcum fragment as a shield as she moved to join Borkus. She blocked the icicle projectiles as she looked for the smallest chance. Even the one-legged bone bird was screeching as it fired its spirit form feathers. It knew that it couldn't break the ice, but it wanted to buy as much time as possible. Everyone was fighting with everything they had so that Vandali could acquire the resurrection device. But it seemed that Vandali could do nothing more. He was already managing 6 spells simultaneously. He had stopped turning the floor near Ice Age's legs into golems as it was completely ineffective, but he was maintaining the shape of 2 orichalcum weapons, and the spirit form transformation on his right hand to protect each of the fallen undead's spirits made 4 more, 6 in total. Even with the multicast spell, he was past his limits. His surpass limits skill was already active, as was his rapid healing skill. Zadyrus was murmuring the incantations for light attribute healing spells, but even so, it felt like his brain was boiling. No matter how big a lake is, there is only so much water that a bucket can draw from it at a time. In same way, no matter how large Vandali's mana pool was, there was a limit to how many spells he could cast at a time. What should I do? What was happening now wasn't a fight to the death. If Vandali left it like this, nobody would die. Only the resurrection device will be destroyed. That spear was clearly moving with some kind of intent. It would have been unnatural for it to head in a straight path towards the place where the resurrection device was likely to be if it was simply on a rampage. It was the spear once wielded by Mikhail, the divine spear of ice, the spear forged for heroes by the god of ice who served Peria, the goddess of water and knowledge. It was unmistakably a legendary class, or maybe even mythical class artifact. In that case, it wasn't strange to think that it had a mind of its own. And that mind considered Mikhail the justice of the champion Belwood and the justice of the god of law and fate, Alder, as true justice. The champion who didn't accept things from other worlds, denying and destroying existing prosperity for the sake of this world's own culture and civilization despite not knowing how long those would take to develop. The god who doesn't acknowledge the lives of those who don't obey his laws, who still passes on discriminatory teachings against the races created by Veda even after 100,000 years have passed. The hero who dealt the fatal blow to the nation of Titans in their name. The crazed magic spear of that hero was trying to destroy the resurrection device that Vandali desired. There was some truth to their beliefs. It couldn't be said that they were completely wrong. So then, was Vandali the one who was wrong? Was his desire to resurrect his dead mother an absolute evil? That wasn't right, was it? Treating the wounded, curing the sick, extending the lives of creatures who will eventually die one day is always a good thing, so why should only the resurrection of someone who is dead be considered evil? I won't acknowledge their beliefs. So I have no choice but to win. How can I do that? I have mana. But I can't win like this. I don't have enough brains. I have too few brain cells. What should I do? Boy, you are at your limit. Zadyrus's voice was full of sorrow. Vandali was at his limit, he couldn't do any more. Could he only watch as the battle was lost, as the hope he had gained was taken away from him? There was one way. If he gave up on the spirits of Bone Monkey and the other wounded undead, there would be less burden on his brain. But he couldn't do that. The resurrection device was his hope to gain something. What use would it be if he lost something to get his hands on it? At first, Bone Monkey and the others had been nothing but tools to him. But now they were his important servants that he had raised up to this point. He could replace their bones no matter how many times they were broken, but he couldn't replace their spirits. That's right, their spirits are right. I do have another brain, don't I? Realizing this, Vandali began to split into two. Boy. At least, this is how it appeared to Zadyrus. However, she quickly realized that this wasn't the case. Spirit form? Vandali was now separate from his physical body. He was having an out-of-body experience. Normally, a body with no soul would collapse and stop moving, like a dead tree. However, Vandali was still using his body through magic. The spirit form Vandali was controlling the physical Vandali through the long-distance control skill that he had acquired. With this, I have two brains, said Vandali. Zadyrus, please take care of my physical body. Yes, leave it to me. Zadyrus was startled by the fact that Vandali was speaking through both his spirit form and his physical body, but she quickly focused on her healing spells. With this, he could split the 6 spells he had barely been managing to maintain, with each brain managing 3. But it was still not enough. In order to stop that miserable, God-made stick, he needed more. But what more could he do? My brain is I'm in spirit form right now. Then do I even need to worry about my shape? Vandali looked at his physical body to see his right arm under spirit form transformation, split into 3 to preserve the spirits of the wounded undead by providing them with mana. When he used spirit form transformation on his physical body, he was able to freely change its shape like he was doing with his right arm. With that being the case, he would certainly be able to change his shape now that he was completely in spirit form. Vandali's vision expanded. Manipulating his spirit form with his spirit form skill, his head split into 2 at the neck. Now he had 3 brains. It still wasn't enough. He quickly added more. Now he had 5 brains. Using his new brains, he made golems. He made more and more. He embedded orichalcum fragments in the golems he made. In short, he was now doing the same thing as that stick. He mixed orichalcum instead of ice into his golems that he made from the floor and walls so that it could be used as a weapon. Stone men with black metal protruding from their bodies roared as they rammed themselves into the octopus of ice, one after another. "Botjan!" exclaimed Rita. "Why is your appearance like that? There are 2 of you and you have so many heads." "I didn't see nothing," shouted Vigoro. "Ah! How terrifyingly beautiful," remarked Eleonora. As golem reinforcements appeared one after another as if Andali was trying to use up all of the walls and open a giant hole in the floor, everyone had turned around in surprise to see 2 Vandalius, and one of them had a rather grotesque appearance. They were surprised, but for some reason, Eleonora's eyes showed signs of awe and excitement. "Everyone, pay no attention to my lord's appearance. You must fight." Bone Man shouted from the ground near Vandali's feet. "Move your hands, not your mouths," Borkus said, reprimanding them. Bone Man and Borkus's voices returned them to their senses, and they returned to work once more to destroy the ice. Indeed, this was simply work now. The magic spear was indeed a legendary class artifact. However, it would normally never have the power to fight battles on its own. It was merely using some method to utilize the huge amount of mana contained in the Dragon Golem's core in order to produce and manipulate ice in order to make its struggling movements. That was why the movements of the cursed ice were slow and stiff. If it were made of normal ice, Porcus and the others would have broken all of it long ago even without orichalcum weapons. That cursed ice was being swarmed with countless golems with orichalcum fragments attached, broken by Vigoro and the Armor Sisters and even directly melted by Vandali's death attribute magic. It couldn't even maintain the shape of its ice even though it had stopped firing projectiles, let alone repel Porcus and the others. This damn spear is so annoying. Porcus struck the spear as it struggled in vain, sending it flying out of the thick chest of the golem that it had been embedded in and spinning onto the floor. The ice stopped moving at that instant. Is it over? Vandali wondered as he returned to his physical body. He felt dizzy for a moment as his extra fields of vision disappeared, but Zediris stopped him from falling to his knees. "Whoa, thank you, but why are you holding onto my head so tightly?" he asked her. "I was just thinking that it would be terrible if this head were to split into multiple as well." Zediris had both arms wrapped around Vandali's head. It seemed that she had been very shocked by the division of his spirit form head. Vandali had frequently branched his arms out into tentacle-like shapes with spirit form transformation, however. Did dividing his head make more of an impact than his arms? More importantly, the first thing I need to do is prepare bodies for Bone Bear and the others. Vandali really wanted to rush to the resurrection device. But that could come last. Reviving the undead came first. He could heal their wounded spirits after putting them in bodies. It wouldn't take much time or effort. But as Vandali attempted to return them to normal, their spirits growled in protest. They had become burdens to Vandali, they were weak. They didn't want to be returned to normal because they wanted to become stronger. Bonebird let out a cry. It seemed to be in agreement, intending to join them. "I think it's possible. But are you sure?" Vandali asked. "If I do this, I don't know if I can undo it." Bonebird nodded, as did Bone Wolf and his companions. Their spirits had already lost the appearance of when they were alive, they were now skeleton-shaped. They had originally been the wandering spirits of animals and insects. They had no memories of how they had appeared when they were alive, and they already had almost no memories of before they were turned into undead. Their loyalty to Vandali was the most important thing to them. It was because of him that they were now immortal creatures with no limited lifespan, no need to eat or reproduce, without the chains of animal instinct binding them. "I understand." Bonebird's spirit came out of its body. The spirits of the others lost their shapes, and all of the spirits mixed together. The bones of Bone Bear and the others that had been scattered around rolled across the floor together in one spot. And then the spirits that had combined with each other and lost their shapes entered that spot. A monster made of bones let out a roar as it was born. It was built like the pieces of different puzzle sets had been forcibly joined. The bones of a bear, a monkey, a wolf and a bird were combined together. It was a chimera with a body consisting of bones. A Japanese person might think it was made only of bones. This is a bone chimera. A creature born of a single malicious entity trapped in the bones of multiple animals, humans and monsters. "This is the first time I am seeing one," said Zediris. "Bone bird, bone monkey, bone wolf, bone bear, bone man. This is a splendid display of loyalty." I am still here," said Bone Man. "Ah, that is right." Bone Man's skull was still lying on the ground. The magic spear's rampage was over, so his bones were steadily gathering together, however. "Bone Man, please let me know if there are any bones you are missing," said Vandali. "As you will." Vandali headed towards the magic spear lying on the floor, bringing Bone Chimera with him. "Vandali-sama, it's dangerous to approach that spear," Eleonora said, trying to stop him, but he waved her down with his hand. As to be expected of an artifact, there wasn't a single scratch on the magic spear. Vandali enveloped it in dark, death attribute mana and then touched it. "Do not touch me!" shouted a voice echoing inside his head. It seemed that this magic spear had a clearer personality than Vandali had expected. A weapon with conscious intelligence. Should this be called an intelligent weapon? Filthy damp. I do not know what your intentions may be, but they will certainly be crushed by Mikhail's successor, my future owner. Enjoy your brief victory while it lasts. I'm not interested in that stuff, so can I ask you to tell me some things regarding the current situation? You were a spear originally created to serve Peria, not Elder, weren't you? Asked Vandali. Judging from the angry, distressed tone of Ice Age, He could guess that Eupion, the god of ice, had similar views to Alder and the champion Belwood, unlike Tristan, the god of the seas who had mated with Vida to become one of the ancestors of the Mer people. Ice Age, an artifact created by Eupion, shared his views. And the hero it had acknowledged as its owner over 200 years ago was Mikhail, the divine spear of ice. He had been a devout believer of Alder, a hero who believed in the justice of the Amid Empire and Mage Shield Nation from the bottom of his heart. However, he had been narrowly defeated by the goddess-made dragon Golem, and Ice Age was left embedded in the Golem's chest, separated from its owner. In this world, those who lost their lives can never come back. In Mikhail's absence, Ice Age had decided to use his cursed ice to seal away the resurrection device that overturned this law of his own accord so that nobody would ever touch it. Normally, he wouldn't have been capable of doing this without his owner despite being an artifact. But by coincidence, he had been able to use the Dragon Golem's core that was lightly touching its tip and receive the necessary supply of mana from there. He had built multiple walls that only Mikhail could pass through. The wall that contained Zandia's hand was not Mikhail's doing, but Ice Age's. But it was not Mikhail or the one who bears his will, but you who came to this place. An insolent creature such as you who toys with life, accompanied by two filthy undying creatures. How regrettable it is that I was only one step away from completely crushing your ambitions. Screamed Ice Age. That's, what? Vandali was about to say, that's a shame, but then he had noticed something strange about Ice Age's words. Two, he said, two. Even if you exclude Ritu and Saria, there's Borkus, Bone Man, Bone Bear, 6 in total. I'm sure this guy wouldn't use a different counter between undead people and animals. So why two? The first time I came here, it was me, Borkus and New Arza, the three of us. Is that what he means? Vandali didn't know how good this magic spear's 5 senses were, but it seemed that it had been working even while embedded in the Dragon Golem's chest. It was obvious once he thought about it. In this state, Ice Age had created walls of ice at the entrance to this chamber, the distant corridor and the entrance leading to this underground area. After all, it wasn't strange to think that he had noticed Vandali and his companions when they had visited this place around 2 years ago. So what has this guy been doing up until now? When a damp who was able to melt his cursed ice appeared in the company of 2 undead instead of Mikhail's successor, what did he do in this period of over a year? Vandali, what's wrong with you all of a sudden? Are you talking with that spear? Hello. Botchan, what's the matter? Taking no notice of Vigoro and Saria's voices, Vandali began to run towards the door that the Dragon Golem had been protecting. The door, which was made of the same material as the wall and difficult to spot, opened on its own as Vandali approached. It had probably been set to open once its guardian, the Golem, was defeated. On the other side of the door was a large pipe made of some unidentified glass-like substance, a magic circle, a monolith with indecipherable characters engraved on it and something that resembled a flat-screen television from Earth. All of them had been pierced by icicles, damaged and broken. Foo-phew, ha 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 ha. It seems that it has worked well. I could obtain mana from the Golem's core, but I had become unable to move in exchange for that. I was unsure whether I had managed to destroy the device with the ice that I created in that distant space, but it is a relief to see that I succeeded. Your evil plans have fallen apart, Damp. Ice Age's harsh, loud laughter sounded repulsive to Vandali's ears. Behind him, Bone Chimera let out a sorrowful cry while Vigoro and the others stood there, frozen in place. And then Vandali turned his wide-open eyes towards Ice Age. If it's broken, I just have to fix it, and if that's impossible, I just have to find another way. I'll never give up on resurrecting Mom. But before that, I have to dispose of this thing. You would destroy me, Damp. It is indeed likely possible for an insolent creature such as you who is even capable of manipulating orichalcum, something that only the gods should be allowed to do. However, doing so would be meaningless. I am an artifact created by Eupion, the god of ice. I am essentially a clone of him. Even if this spear is destroyed, my consciousness will return to Eupion and one day I shall stand before you once more in the hands of another hero like Mikhail. And then I shall sever the thread of your evil life, along with your filthy undying creatures. Vandali felt nauseous as he listened to the repulsively confident voice that had absolute belief in its own righteousness. I'll ask you just to make sure. Are you serious? Despite his nausea, Vandali asked the spear this question, just to be absolutely certain about his upcoming decision. Of course. If you should regret anything, regret your own cursed birth, then I will destroy you. Vandali stabbed his spirit form fingers into the magic spear. He felt the orichalcum resist, tearing off his skin. He felt pain, as if his exposed flesh and bone were being scraped away by a file. Ice Age's voice turned into a screaming noise. It sounded so pleasant to Vandali's ears that he forgot his own pain. "It seems that you're a clone of a great god, but you're one of our genuine enemies," he said. "Since you've said that you will curse us and deny us with all of your might, with not a single shred of mercy, with no exception, then I have no choice but to do this." It was possible that Ice Age didn't know why Vandali had wanted to obtain the resurrection device. But it didn't matter. In that case, that would simply mean that Ice Age had said, evil intentions, while not knowing anything. If that was the case, dampers were an absolute evil to him, worse than insects that caused only great harm while having no benefits to existing, whose intentions were not even worth listening to. That was to be expected. This spear believed Mikhail's actions had been those of justice. The actions of the hero who had believed his home nation was good for obeying the orders of the Empire to invade the Titan nation that was doing nothing more than prospering in the area surrounded by the mountain range. The hero who had put an end to that nation. And he even called those who had turned into undead after being killed by that hero filthy. As long as this magic spear existed, he would continue cursing Vandali and his companions for being evil and watch vigilantly for an opportunity to tear out their entrails with his tip. That was the kind of existence he was. "If I left someone like you alone, I wouldn't be able to calmly look for a way to resurrect my mother, and I would definitely be unable to become happy in the future," said Vandali. "Ah, there it is. I thought it would be here since you said you're a clone of a god. I'm glad I found it. Even I can't destroy something that doesn't exist." Ice Age continued screaming unintelligibly. "You bastard, you would turn a god into your enemy." "No, we're enemies of your god no matter what we do, aren't we? So it doesn't matter what I do, does it?" What was Ice Age trying to say after he had already destroyed any opportunity for negotiations, reconciliation, harmony or a truce, all on his own? Had he said and done all of these things with so little resolve that he expected to remain unharmed afterwards? If so, Vandali couldn't help but admire his nerve. He would find it impossible to be so bold. "I think it's impossible for you to do this, but if you can, please tell him something for me," said Vandali. "Tell him that he's my enemy." Mka, Ice Age's wonderful song stopped and the clear sound of a cloned god's soul being destroyed rang out. The levels of the Golem transmutation, spirit form, multicast, soul break and long-distance control skills have increased. You have acquired the unique skill, Godslayer. Side Story Chapter 1, In a Divine Realm. In the space between worlds, Rod Corti, the god who ruled over the circles of transmigration for multiple worlds including Earth, Origin and Lambda, had created a place that could be called a divine realm and was currently sitting in there. This was also the place that the souls of the 100 people who had died on Earth had once gathered. Rod Corti was currently observing Origin's present state. As a god, he was capable of seeing many things happening there from outside the world. He was far from omniscient, but he could gain a general picture of things. The lapsing of Origin into chaos is inevitable. "I suppose the cause lies in the existence of Amamiya Hiroto and his death," he said, speaking to himself. The world where magic and science coexisted, where Vandali had lived during his second lifetime, where Amamiya Hiroto and the others who were reincarnated were still living. Rod Corti considered this world to be as far developed as Earth, but it was falling deep into chaos. The cause of this was Vandali Amamiya Hiroto's death attribute. The military nation that had used him as an experimental animal extorted death attribute mana out of him and produced a large number of magic items that exceeded common sense. Cookware capable of fermenting food to make it reach the optimum level of maturity in an instant. Storage cabinets that kept food preserved almost permanently. Medical equipment that removed any poison and illness from the body without causing any harmful effects. Pills that restored the organs with impaired function due to aging, illness or injury. Hair regrowth medicine that restored lost hair. Things that had been impossible through other attributes of magic and previous science, things that had been theoretically possible but almost impossible to actually create in practice. Such things had been created at unbelievably low costs. That death attribute mana had created dreamlike produce and domestic livestock, led to the announcement of cures for previously incurable viruses, pathogens and hereditary diseases, and even made cryogenic sleep possible. Research had almost reached the secret behind immortality. If one were to ask whether such things were possible with death attribute mana alone, the answer is that it really was. At a glance, the death attribute may seem like a simple counterpart to the life attribute. Indeed, the things both attributes were capable of were similar, and if the life attribute transcends its highest limits, it can achieve exceedingly close results. However, they are not completely the same. The reason is because life is energy. No matter how much energy one adds, no matter how much one tries to limit its consumption, it will run out eventually. In other words, death occurs. The death attribute is the one that governs over death. It is able to remove the phenomenon of death from living things. It is free to accelerate or stop decomposition. In the same way, it is simple to produce things that can eliminate poison and illnesses. It is not even difficult to return failing organs and cells to a healthy state. However, the military nation that discovered the death attribute had caused Amamiya Hiroto to die in their reckless experiments. And the others who had reincarnated in this world had thoroughly destroyed him. Not even a single fragment of his mana had been left behind. Nobody could create death attribute magic items anymore. The research could not continue. The produce and livestock that had been created still remained, but those alone weren't enough to satisfy mankind. The military nation was internationally condemned for the existence of the research laboratory that had conducted illegal experiments that completely ignored human rights. Its president and the high officials that had been involved with the laboratory resigned, but that was only the beginning. The dreamlike magic items that the military nation had been producing and selling were now completely impossible to create. The largest nation in the international committee that had condemned the military nation for its actions immediately began research on the death attribute. Amamiya Hiroto had killed most of the researchers in the original laboratory and consumed much of their spirits. Their souls were just barely intact, but their memories and personalities were not in a state for them to be useful, so even methods such as necromancy were useless. The few survivors, the remaining research materials and the death attribute magic items possessed by each nation were all gathered for analysis in a desperate attempt to reproduce the death attribute. The people in power had been lured by the industrial and medical advances offered by the death attribute, or rather, the word immortality which had almost been achieved. The military nation had become much weaker, but as long as the powerful men of the world continued to desire immortality, the secret feuds between the federal states, commonwealths, republics and new nations would surface in a large way. War could break out and cause the loss of millions, tens of millions of lives. I don't really care about that, but Rodcorti had no interest in calculating those numbers. In fact, people being killed in war would be a wonderful thing. He would welcome them with open arms. He was the god who ruled over the circles of transmigration, after all. It would be problematic if people didn't die and come to be reborn. Even if tens of millions of people were to die all at once, Rodcorti's transmigration system wouldn't have any difficulties in dealing with them. It could process up to 1 trillion people at a time. There would be no problem at all. Origin had a population of 10 billion people. Only a small number, not even 1% of them, would die in war, and their numbers would soon increase again afterwards. Things would be back to normal in less than 100 years. In fact, people's life expectancies in Origin had surpassed those on Earth by too much due to the existence of magic in Origin in addition to science, so this was just perfect. Rodcorti did indeed desire the world's development, but a society capable of sustaining a population of billions of people without falling to ruin could already be considered nothing but a good result. Even if a population of 7 billion were to shrink to 5 billion, he would consider it as only a minor decrease. Rather, if humanity underwent some kind of spiritual evolution or reached some next stage, then they would really be beyond his control. He wouldn't mind if they advanced into outer space, however. With that said, Rodcorti had no intentions of directly intervening with the world, and his ability to do so was limited, so he couldn't do anything about the situation anyway. If he wanted to stop the conflict and war in Origin, it was possible for him to send a divine message to those who had been reincarnated from Earth in order to guide them and give them information. However, he had no intention of doing that, either. The reason he had sent them to Origin rather than Lambda in the first place was so that they could gain experience. He had helped them by giving them cheat-like abilities, fortunes and destinies, so he would have them do as they liked, whether they chose to stop the conflict, participate in it or simply stay uninvolved. If war began, some of them, maybe even dozens of them, could die. That would be an experience for them in itself. There were 100 of them after all. There would be no problem if some of them failed. For Rodcorti, a god who was not directly believed in by humans, humans were nothing but bits in a computer. Just information flowing in a system. Good and evil, tragedy, happiness, none of that mattered. Everything would be fine as long as the system continued working with no problems. The problem is immortality, I suppose. The thing that would cause Rod Corti trouble was immortality. As he was a god ruling over the circles of transmigration, creatures that don't die would be nothing but beings who denied his authority and hinder his system. It would be even more problematic than undead who continued moving after death and the resurrection of the dead. Undead are a result of souls lingering in the world without being reincarnated, but they would still return to the system eventually. The resurrection of the dead was problematic, but if the soul was already transmigrated, only the body would be resurrected and the soul would never return. Only a small error would be caused. However, immortal beings would never return. If undead were small errors that wouldn't cause any problems even if left alone for a while, and the resurrection of the dead was a bug that was slightly more difficult to fix, immortal beings would be a critical bug that would require the system to be brought down for maintenance in order to eliminate. Even considering that, it's good that Amamiya Hiroto died. If Amamiya Hiroto had continued to live, the research had gone on and immortality had become a reality, Rod Corti would have been racking his brains over how to deal with it. Even if he were to send those reincarnated from Earth a divine message, he possessed no way of forcing them to obey his commands. He couldn't even send divine messages to humans other than them. This was also because Rod Corti's existence wasn't known and he wasn't worshipped by the people of any world. This was to ensure that if something serious were to happen in one world, it wouldn't affect the circles of transmigration of other worlds, but he was now regretting not preparing another being like a subordinate god or collaborative god. Gods are not omniscient or omnipotent, their direct influence extends only as far as their authority allows and to those who believe in them. No, for now, Origin would be fine. Rod Corti would let it be. Mankind would not self-destruct or decrease in numbers too drastically. Coming to this conclusion, Rod Corti shifted his gaze away from Origin. And then he suddenly realized something. It has been 5 years since Amamiya Hiroto reincarnated in Lambda. His memories may have returned by now. Memories of previous lives returning while still in the body of a breastfeeding infant would have placed a huge mental burden on reincarnated individuals. In order to protect their minds, Rod Corti had set things up so that their memories would start returning from the age of 5 onwards. As long as nothing hugely troublesome and unexpected occurred, memories would not return to a breastfeeding infant. The fact that Amamiya Hiroto's soul has not returned here means that he was unfortunate enough to not die within the first 5 years of his life. It may be some time before his memories return, but I should check to make sure. If Amamiya Hiroto's memories had indeed returned, Rod Corti had to drive him to suicide so that he would die before it was discovered that he could potentially make immortality a reality. He had 3 curses placed on him, but even Rod Corti had been unable to erase the death attribute that had soaked into his soul and become a part of him. If he struggled and refused to give up, he would learn to cast death attribute magic in Lambda as well. For this purpose, Rod Corti used his system to investigate Amamiya Hiroto's life following his reincarnation. Through this system, it was possible to look at a reincarnated soul's past and present situation. However, there was no information about Amamiya Hiroto. What is this? He searched again, but there was no information. There were records of his reincarnation from Earth to Origin, but the records stopped suddenly following his death in Origin. Could it be that he wasn't reincarnated? That isn't possible. Amamiya Hiroto was definitely reincarnated. But the fact that there are no records in the system means, oh no. He fell out of my system and entered a circle outside of my control. For Rod Corti, there were 3 irregularities in Lambda. The first was the undead that even appeared from time to time in Origin. The other 2 were the monsters that the Demon King and his subordinates had created in ancient times and the new races created by the goddess Vida. Those 2 weren't managed by Rod Corti's Circle of Transmigration system. When the Demon King created the monsters, if their transmigration fell under the categories of Rod Corti's system, the Demon King would have been unable to reincarnate monsters' souls and have them be reborn. For this reason, he had somehow managed to imitate Rod Corti's Circle of Transmigration system and created his own transmigration system. That was why monsters were still rampant in Lambda to this day. This was also the reason bosses and mid-bosses were unnaturally generated inside dungeons. Humans and other races who worshipped the evil gods were now falling outside of Rod Corti's system and being incorporated into the now fallen Demon King's system instead. This was another thing causing slightly problematic errors in Rod Corti's system. And the problems caused by the races created by Vida were due to the hostility between Vida, or rather, all of the gods of Lambda, and Rod Corti. When the Demon King first appeared, the gods of Lambda known as Vida and Alda had asked Rod Corti for help. Rod Corti had refused all of their requests and simply observed carefully. If he were to get involved and the Demon King destroyed his soul, this would have effects on all of the circles of transmigration of the other worlds that he managed, not just Lambda. This was a decision he made to prevent that from happening. To Rod Corti, Lambda was but one of many worlds. If it were destroyed, Rod Corti would feel pain equivalent to several bones being broken, but it wouldn't be a fatal wound. He wasn't willing to risk a swift death in order to avoid his bones being broken. After that, Rod Corti had protested against the decision of the gods of Lambda to summon champions from other worlds in order to turn the tides of the battle. Because the champions had only been summoned from worlds whose circles of transmigration Rod Corti ruled over, this had caused errors in his system. He requested that they quickly send the champions back or simply exploit them until they died. Back then, Rod Corti had thought that Lambda's destruction was inevitable, so he hadn't wanted more trouble to be caused by a meaningless struggle. As a result, a deep gulf formed between Rod Corti and the gods of Lambda. Rod Corti himself didn't think much of it, but Vida in particular held a profound distrust in him. With this as one of the reasons, Vida made an imitation of the system created by the Demon King with her own original functions included, creating her own circle of transmigration system, and then gave birth to new races including the vampires. As she ruled over the life attribute, her divinity was quite close to Rod Corti's. It would have been impossible for her to rule over the circles of transmigration of multiple worlds, but she probably thought that she would be able to manage one worlds once she built a system for it. It was likely that she intended for not only the races she created, but all of the future races of people that would exist in Lambda to be managed by her own circle of transmigration system. However, despite being hostile towards Rod Corti as Vida was, Alda, who prioritized the strict preservation of law and order above all else, defeated Vida and her followers. As a result, only the new races created by Vida were being reincarnated through Vida's system. There was a high chance that Amamiya Hiroto's soul had been swallowed up by either the Demon King's system or the Goddess's system and he had become reborn as either a monster or a member of one of the races created by Vida. He isn't here after all. Using his system, Rod Corti looked up all of the people who had been born around the time of Amamiya Hiroto's second reincarnation but no information on Hiroto was to be found. But just why has something like this happened? The probability of this happening is less than 1 in 10 quadrillion. Unless I am just terribly unlucky. Oh no. It's because of that. Rod Corti remembered that the things Amamiya Hiroto hadn't been given included not only cheat-like abilities, but a fortune and a destiny as well. As he had no fortune and no destiny, there was always a constant danger that he would go along a path that even Rod Corti himself wouldn't be able to predict. On top of that, 3 curses had been placed on him just before he was reincarnated. Rod Corti had done this in order to encourage him to end his own life, but the possibility that this had caused flaws in Rod Corti's system couldn't be ruled out. I have no choice. It will take some time, but I will investigate if there are any people who have encountered Amamiya Hiroto's reincarnated soul. I should at least be able to learn of his current situation. This is a damp. There was a damp appearing in the memories of a certain merchant. It seemed that Amamiya Hiroto had indeed reincarnated as a member of a race created by Vida. But this wasn't the problem. Impossible. Why have his memories returned? On top of that, he is already using death attribute magic and controlling the undead. Rod Corti couldn't even tell whether the damper in this memory was even a year old or not, and yet he was already using death attribute magic and speaking with a childish voice. His memories had clearly returned. I suppose this is because I did not give him a fortune. In that case, I have to improve my method the next time I have a chance. Rod Corti regretted the mistakes that he had made during the process of reincarnating Amamiya Hiroto and the others from Earth. Back then, Rod Corti had prepared enough cheat-like abilities, fortunes and destinies for a little over 100 people. He had prepared plenty, so that he wouldn't be lacking any even if there were many people to distribute them to. And just as he finished preparing, the ferry had sunk with good timing and around 100 people, not including the evil people responsible, had died. Among them, all but one chose to be reborn in another world. Thinking that it would be a waste to not use everything he had prepared, he had distributed it all without leaving a single item remaining, only to find that he had overlooked one person. To think that this one remaining person would become so troublesome as a result. Now then, the question is what to do with Amamiya Hiroto Vandali. Should I warn Alda? I suppose it would be better to set the evil gods on him. Alder was the only attribute god who was still currently properly active in Lambda, the god who possessed the most power. However, his relationship with Rod Corti was as terrible as it could be. Alder had no choice but to overlook Rod Corti's actions so that the order of the circles of transmigration would be preserved, but that did not mean that he forgave them. Rod Corti's decision to reincarnate these people had been made without Alder's knowledge. Because of this, if Alder were to find out about Vandali and the others, he would be infuriated with Rod Corti. From Alder's point of view, Rod Corti had abandoned him in a time of need without offering any assistance, and now he was doing these things on his own, and 100 more people would be reincarnating in Lambda with jinxes, cheat-like abilities that defied common sense that Rod Corti had given them on a whim. It was more than likely that Alder would order his subordinate gods and followers to murder those 100 reincarnated individuals. With that said, leaking information to the evil gods to have them kill Vandali would also be a poor move. The evil gods had sense of values so twisted that Rod Corti couldn't understand them. It was possible that they would make Vandali their ally instead of killing him. As a result of much contemplation, Rod Corti decided to watch and wait for a while. A few of those reincarnated in origin should die in the next few years. I'll ask them to kill Vandali. Undead had always appeared in Lambda, so the number of undead increasing by a few wouldn't have any effect on the system now. And for Vandali, whose curses would prevent him from turning his experiences into skills, reaching immortality without the assistance of the science of origin would be an enormous task. It would be impossible to do so in decades, centuries, or possibly even millennia. In a few years' time, once the second of the reincarnated individuals died in origin, he would ask that person to kill Vandali, and then there would be no problem. That person would have cheat-like abilities created by Rod Corti himself, while Vandali had only death attribute magic and the 100 million mana contained within his empty frame. When Rod Corti analyzed the records from the merchant, it seemed that Vandali had succeeded in leveling up, but the other two curses should still be functioning with no problems. He would probably not become any stronger than that. There was no problem. Coming to this conclusion, Rod Corti turned his gaze away from Lambda. If he had searched the memories of the adventurer Luciliano who had encountered Vandali through his lived dead, he might have felt a greater sense of danger. If he had made contact with the evil gods, he would likely have learned that the soul of the vampire Serkrent had been destroyed by Vandali and made a move before the souls involved in his own system were destroyed. But instead, Rod Corti remained oblivious to the greatest mistake that he had ever made. Chapter 52, What's Impossible is Impossible. So then let's think of a method that is possible. Volume 3, March of the Eclipse King's Army. On this day, tears of blood fell from every statue of Yipion, the god of ice serving Peria, the goddess of water and knowledge, in the Barn-Gaia continent.
Okay, guys, and here we are right now with my sketch. Okay, so far I made 7 sketches of different kinds of shapes that I did. So yeah, this is the shapes that I did. The baby is just really random. I just thought of it like, oh, why not draw something that I haven't done yet? So this is the first time I've drawn a baby. So here we are, and yeah, I think that the shapes that I did here will turn out. It is really nice sketches I did. I really like dragon. His nonchalant face, coming from this squarish, yeah, squarish guide. I resulted to this. The the first one, yeah, it's so simple, but I think it's still really good for a simple sketch. She could probably do it. Yeah, she could probably be added to a side character or something in a comics. It's pretty quickly done, and I love it. Mm, the pig, for the oval, slanted oval. Yeah, it's probably the first time trying to make a caricature out of a pig, but yeah, it's nice. I think it would be a very comedic addition to any kind of type of story manga. If you put this kind of character there, like One Piece or something. Uh, this guy though, I didn't expect I would make it look like this from a square, from a rectangle. It's really nice. The hat, yeah, from a Japanese hat, Japanese looks, but a very squarish and edgy art style. It's really nice. I will probably apply this to my future comics. I like this kind of style. Very, very westerny, I might say. The style, the art style. And for this one, yeah, when I was sketching this, so you can see, uh, you can actually compare this to the baby that I draw over here. I was actually trying to make the baby first over here, but then when I was doing the this on the face, I thought like, maybe I'll make it into a gas mask, futuristic gas mask, and yeah, voila, this is it. I love the how I did the hair also. Maybe I should probably fix it a bit, just a tiny bit. Yeah, because it's not. There we go. I think I'll do better. Just erase it a little bit over here. Over here too. Yeah, yeah. Looks good. hmm It's like what you call this? A fly, a fly gas mask. Really interesting. When I was drawing the shapes, I was like, would be interesting if I make it a gas mask. So here we are. I really want to try my stuff also when it comes to sci-fi. Sci-fi stuff is one of my big things that I really enjoy creating. So this really works pretty good in my opinion. I'll just add a bit of shading over here. Mm, sorry guys if my shading is not that good, but still improving. Ooh, that looks kind of bad. It looks she looks like she has a very big nose with this black stuff. How about I add some shading over here also? Yeah, that looks good. She looks more punkish. hmm There we go. Yeah, and here we are with the baby. The face looks so goofy, man. Uh, yeah, this is my first time drawing a baby, I think. I'm not very sure. I can't remember when was the last time I draw something very childish like this. Maybe for a work or something. I don't know. If it's work related and it's not very special to me, I would tend to forget some projects. Uh, but most of the projects that I like, yeah, they're forever imprinted in my head. I won't forget those. And for this one though, I'm planning to make a make a post anatomy character, full body anatomy over here for this one, and draw one of my uh, original characters that I'm planning to make a comics out of, and yeah, she will be very nice. I think pointing at us right here, she's a very punky girl, bit boyish, but yeah. Okay, so yeah, this is the anatomy 101 that will happen. Oh, I mean sketching 101, not anatomy, because there's not any anatomy here yet. Well, I guess if you can count the head as an part of the anatomy, yeah, you may say also. hmm The baby is actually full body, so yeah, you can also count that as an anatomy. Mm. And yeah, I'm gonna finish the sketch next stream. I'll probably add another page, add some few characters, maybe some partitions, and make a complete sketch on each partitions that I'll be making. I don't know if a 6 by 6 or a 4 by 4 would do. Hmm. Well, it depends in my next stream. But anyway, let's go to our story for today. It's really interesting. I really like the story going on right now for the dead mage who doesn't want a fourth time. So, uh, they went and defeated the golem dragon down at the castle, where they managed to defeat one of the actually defeat the spear that has been blessed by a god, who actually has a portion of the spirit of the god. And that dude, the politics about the godhood in this world, this particular world, is just, oh my goodness, the bullcrap of id- uh, their their philosophy. It's just uh, it's hard to stomach, I might say. It's too selfish and too abominable for my taste. That's why I really hated the some of the villains in this character in this particular story when I first read it, and it's very grating to my to my nerves sometimes, because their self righteousness, it's one of the sins of humanity that I really hate. That they think that they're always right and they're not wrong, and they keep insisting that anything that is being done that is not familiar for them is wrong. So it's really frustrating for me hearing that kind of stuff, because I've been to some life experience like that. That even though I try to be a good person, doing something right, sometimes I got blamed, and yeah, some stuff that really was very unfair for me. So yeah, this kind of affected me a bit when I was reading the story for the first time, and until now, of course, when rereading this with you guys. So yeah, let's see. Can we see some of the fan arts? Let me see. Okay, here we go. So yeah, like last time, I've showed you some of the fan arts of. Oh no, not the fan art. I mean the original illustration for the light novel. And so yeah, so here we are. I think this is for volume 2. Yeah, it's kind of strange because the website where I was reading some of this, it says that it's still in volume 2, but here in this fan art images that they're showing, I mean the illustration that they're showing, some of this are not part of the not part of the right volume. They're kind of showing them not properly shown. So yeah, I think this is the only thing I can probably show this to you guys. So yeah, this is the mode that Vandally showed when he asked to project his soul out of his body and started to make multiple parts of his body. Multiple parts of his hands, his head, and multiplying his head, so that he can do more spells using his brain, his multiple brains. It's really an interesting thought also, like uh, his soul can be manipulated into different kinds of shapes, and as long as his imagination's capability. So so he did this so that he can use a lot of magic, a lot of skills that was needed for him to defeat the dragon and the spear that he was fighting against. Mhm. Also, the thing that I was really confused back then when I first read this, when he was doing a job change, I thought he was going to disregard his first job that he picked, because I thought the first job he picked was really 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 strong. And when I read the part where he was going to do another job, change job, I thought he was going to disregard the first job that he picked, but it wasn't until a few volumes. Oh no, actually chapters only. After a few chapters, I understood that uh, he's not disregarding the first uh, job that he got. He's actually like stacking the jobs as he's getting, as long as he reaches the certain level that he needs, so that he can upgrade into a different job. So yeah, so he's getting different kinds of jobs for his abilities, and I can't remember what's his. Yeah, the golem manipulation. I think yeah, the golem master or something. His new job right now. Hmm. So it's really interesting that he got to a different level now. I won't show the other fan arts because no illustrations, because this will be spoiling us. So yeah, close your eyes, guys. But yeah, anyway, let's look forward for the next chapters, because right now we read some parts of the spirit world where uh, what's the name of the god again? He's the guy that sent them. Sorry, guys, I'm very bad at names. Uh, uh, let me. Okay.
Sides.
Rod Carty. Uh, yeah, Rod Cartney. So, Rod Cartney, very uh, a big jerk of a god, I might say. He's the most stupidest god of all, and his selfishness is has no bounds. I might say he's worse than the the gods that were against Vida, because he's just so selfish, and he's like so full of himself that he can't really think of the things that he's doing was actually wrong. Especially the part where he just disregards Vandal's life when he was resurrected for the second time. Yeah, it was really stupid for him just to uh, disregard Vandal's plea to him when he asked him to just at least give him a skill or something, give him a normal life. Instead, he asked him to. He went a he planned for him to go through a very bad life, and then he also cursed him, and he was and now he's planning to do it a third time in the new world that he was planning. So it's really really stupid. But now he is suffering from the consequence of his stupidity. So I'm looking forward to what will happen in the near future. Uh, Especially to Rod Courtney when he will discover what Vandally is capable now, as explained from that last chapter that we've read. If only he also did a bit more digging for Vandally's background, he might be able to prevent what is about to happen to him when, yeah, when he will be face to face against Vandally one day. This will be very interesting, I would say. And so yeah, just look forward to it. So yeah, anyway, guys, this is the end of this episode. Hopefully you will leave a like, subscribe, and continue supporting me if you enjoyed my digital art today. Uh, so yeah, so look forward to next stream for new chapters and new episodes for this art designs that I'm doing. Hmm. I'll definitely update my thumbnail next time for volume 3 with this as my cover. Also, I'll probably insert this there. Hmm. And I'm also waiting for the commission for my friend. So let's look forward to that. Hopefully that his brainstorming right now will end already, and that we can start creating the comics that he wants me to create, the commission. Okay, guys. So this will be the end for this episode, and thank you once again for watching. Have a nice day, a great day to all of you. Okay, bye bye. This is your boy signing off.
Chapter 52.